Dr. Chris Caldwell, president of the College of Menominee Nations and a proud CMN alumnus, has led the college since 2020, advancing initiatives rooted in Menominee values and hands-on learning. With nearly 30 years of experience in sustainable forestry and environmental studies, he's recently earned his PhD from UW-Madison, focusing on indigenous sustainability. So please welcome Chris Caldwell.
So, nature Menominee, Mashik Natanwe Makinak, Mashik Moni Wiyak, Maki Wanakot, Machitaw Nawiswan, Chris Caldwell, Mokaman Nawiswan, Natoakam, Owasa, Awe, Notnat, Eugene Caldwell, Awe, Mashik, Nakia, Linda Caldwell, Askinet, Katna, Kasitna, Nitsky, Wakian, Namata Mosam, Piet Kamok, Machitaw Wiswan, Tony Caldwell, Mokaman Nawiswan, the Tanuk, Niece Brooke Caldwell, Mashik, Trinity Caldwell, Okimau, Omat Namanewak, Match, Kakina, Homakiwa Kamik, and Omat Namane, Natawa, Mashik, Naku, Omat Namane, Waitnison. So good morning, everyone. And just wanted to introduce myself in the Menominee language, just share a little about who I am, the people I come from, my family, where I live, my clan, which is Bear, and that I'm the president at the college, and I speak a little Menominee. So I think that's an important part of the protocols that we carry out as Indigenous peoples when we come together like this. Well, I was going to say, first of all, thank you to all of our tribal leaders, to IPC, to our veterans, and I heard Otachia give the opening invocation and others who helped welcome all of our visitors here. So that's what I was going to start with first, but I'll go first and say my apologies to the program planners for coming in a little late here. I hope I didn't give you guys too much of a startle, just running a little behind. But apologies, I'm here, we're good to go. But second, I also wanted to thank the Intertribal Timber Council. Thank you for all of the work that you do. And I'm not as familiar with IPC as I had been over the years, but I hear a lot of names shared out, kind of recognized from email strings and things like that. But yes, thank you very much for what you do annually through this symposium and all the work you do in DC and far away from our forests, but necessary work. And thank you to the planning committee. Thank you to especially the ones who are still moving around the room, making sure that all of you are able to be here and experience this. And so I thank everyone for that, because when I think about the ITC symposium, I think of all the opportunities that happened for me, or even points in time where there were transitions. Like Paul said, we met way back in Warm Springs, and I think he didn't have a beard at the time, so he was fresh off the forestry production line, getting familiar with things. But throughout the years, I've been timber marker when we hosted back in the 90s. I just barely knew what was going on. I was helping weight tables down, sweep up floors, put out chairs and tables, things like that. And then eventually, when I kept going to ITC, either work would send me, or when I became a student, part of the USDA Forest Service BIA student trainee program, I used to come here and visit with people. And it was during those times that I was exposed to ideas that some of our presenters talked about, talking to others that I might not have talked to before. And then it led me to different opportunities, like moving from a technician to a student, or choosing a thesis project for my master's focused on tribal forest certification, and what that meant for non-governmental authority in relation to tribal sovereignty and self-determination. And then the last one I went to, I think, was when I transitioned started working with the planners over in this job, and then it carried over to the college. So there's always been a connection between the college and the forestry work that we do as a tribe. And so, I just point that out because today I'm here also as a transition point. I've been the president at the college for 6 years, even though my background is sustainable forestry, both in the field and educationally. And somehow I'm president of a college, so still trying to figure that one out. But it's not a challenge that I don't. It's a challenge that I enjoy. But I'm also at a transition point here today because March 7th, I was heading to a meeting and I had a heart attack, an emergency issue, 100% blockage of the right artery. I was heading to a conference to give a speech. I had to pull over, taken to the hospital. They did the cath lab thing where it kind of cleaned it out, put a stent and gave me more time until I could have a triple heart bypass April 28th. So as of this morning, this is actually 6 weeks out from that triple heart bypass. And I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, am I ready to stand up in front of a large room full of people and talk about things? I figured so because one of the things that kept resonating in my mind, our founding president, Dr. Verna Fowler, she would say, and I might misquote this because didn't look at it this morning, but she said one day the Menominee will be as well known for their educational initiatives as they are for their sustainable forest management. And that really sits at a nexus point for me in thinking about these two paths I've been on of tribal forestry and tribal higher education. And so this first slide just gives you a sense of something important about Menominee. We welcome our visitors, but a Payakan Nakihi sit down upon means that there's also teaching that goes on when people come to our lands. We know there's a responsibility for us as the people of this land to teach those who are coming to learn or to gather or they need help in some way. And so I like to show that because it also shows our presence on the landscape with our fellow tribes and how things have changed over the years. And that makes me think of the theme of the conference, forestry in a changing environment. And some of our leaders spoke to that already, that there is change inherent in forests, and as people with cultural ties are doing the work on the land, we understand that the forest is in constant change, both visible and invisible to us, and maybe just sometimes invisible because we're not actually looking and listening and hearing. But it's alive, it's changing, and so things are always in flux across biotic, abiotic factors, water cycles, soil composition, natural succession and disturbances, and other ecosystem functions. I got to use some of my forestry background in writing that statement. But also, as humans, we cause disturbance as well, locally, but also now as part of a broader global society, and the decisions that people make outside of our reservations, away from even the United States, are having far-reaching impacts on what we see in our forests today. And so human disturbance across these systems is a big issue. In our ancestors' day, we know they always tried to model behaviors that adapted them to the landscape so they could secure food, housing, clothing, medicines, things they needed for life. And we carry that into our forestry programs today and things we do as tribes, but there's still a big impact that we're a part of. And so I wrestle with that as well because as much work as we do, there's a lot more that's happening that can feel like it's beyond our control or something that so there's direct consequences built into that relationship that as managers and protectors and caretakers that we all take on as in our roles in the work that we do or just being part of the community. So we all know these things, many of these things through the cultural activities we may have grown up with or talking to our elders. And so for the Menominee, we understood these things as well. And so a peakan, a key, sit down upon the land is just I see it and I've heard it talked about from elders as both a diplomacy, but also an educational endeavor. So I like the way that kind of ties across tribal forestry, tribal higher education. Am I in charge of this? Is that, okay. Yeah, so a little bit of what I was talking about was the convergence, the tribal forestry and academia pathways. And so I just wanted to kind of give an example, my personal example, and one that I've enjoyed over the years. Coming to ITC, I always look forward to, I would say, three things. The host welcome with all the food from the place, touring the place, getting to listen to Dr. Gary Morishima, and then getting to hear Mark Phillips put a rosy spin on the news coming out of DC and other corners of the policy area. So those are things I came to love over time coming to ITC. And I would just point to one particular article that's kind of carried with me through the years. Dr. Morishima wrote an article called The School of Red Herring. I think this is in 2004, 2005 Evergreen magazine. They've done some great issues on tribal forestry over the years. And they're valuable resources too if you're citing in academic writing, but really enjoy those. But, when he talked about a school of red herring, he talked about ways that, I don't know how many people know what a red herring is, a metaphor for a misstatement or some type of fallacy that's introduced to redirect you away from the truth of the matter being talked about. And in the article, Dr. Morishima was talking about this in terms of how our, in some cases, our federal forests were not able to manage because of the ways that red herrings would be introduced. Appeals to authority when force of argument relies on someone who has no expertise or who is knowledgeable but has a vested interest in the outcome. That's a red herring or an appeal to consequence, whether good or bad. It appears to the weight of the argument rests on that belief, but is not relevant to the truth of the matter being discussed. Wishful thinking is a good one. I like how we shared that one. That's the Santa Claus one, or no, the appeal to consequence is the Santa Claus one. But wishful thinking is the belief that something good or bad will happen. Oh, I doubled up on it. Well, wishful thinking, wishing I would have did a better job on a speech, but loaded words is another one. Trees versus ancient forest. Equivocation and vagueness. When an unsound argument appears valid because the terms have multiple meanings. And over the years, I've read his article, and the one part he does get to is that he talks about sustainability as being one of the bigger red herrings for natural resource management because it's such a almost like a non-achievable goal that's framed as achievable. But people spend their time arguing what is sustainability, when do we know we reach sustainability. And so he kind of talks through the article about that sustainability detracting from the ability of managers to meet natural resource forestry goals. And it really resonated with me because growing up, I heard these two different dichotomies in our community and visitors. And it seemed unanimously that often visitors coming here would be wowed by our forest and the forest management practices that we carried out. And yet within the community, there were certain groups that opposed and disagreed, asking clear cutting just because of how it looked afterwards, white pine shelter woods, herbicide use, things like that, that there was this dissonance between visitors and community, and that was what was pushing me from working in forestry to wanting to go back to school to learn more about forestry so I could better understand. And I think Dr. Morishima's article actually pointed me to the importance of how our tribal communities are closely ingrained with the management decisions that are made. It could be a good management decision, but the way that things are framed, either in a community setting or external setting, can influence the application of that decision. So that really stood out to me, and sustainability especially, because one of the things I've been working on as a student was being a part of the Sustainable Development Institute at the College of Menominee Nation. The institute was created at the same time as the college in 92, 93. And it was really a collaboration at that time between college leaders, MTE leaders, Menominee tribal government, and our historic preservation folks to talk about sustainable development and what that actually meant to us as a people, as a community, and that we might have an example that fits what the United Nations was talking about at the time, with definitions like sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations, present and future generations without detrimentally affecting the resources or biological systems of the planet. So that was aspirational at the international level, flowing down into the different nations, United States. And so our tribal leaders thought, well, we have an example. We've created a sustainable forestry program that provides economy, protects our natural and cultural resources, so that our people can continue the ways of life of the Menominee. And all of these things coming together while generating an economy for the community. And so eventually, the theoretical model of sustainability was created. And I don't know if I can see everybody, but if you raise your hand if you've ever seen the model before. Yeah. So we have a good mix of those familiar and those who are just seeing it now. Really what the model does is represent this story of Menominee sustainable forestry beyond just thinking about forest management and actually thinking about environmental human relationships and how does one impact the other, and how do we move toward this concept of sustainability, thinking about it more as a process rather than an end point. And so the dimensions of the model also reflect that in those days, someone mentioned the three-legged stool, and I, for the life of me, can't remember. Economy, ecology, and social. I think, yeah, there we go. It didn't fit what the Menominee were looking at in terms of our story of sustainability models. And so you see on ours, land and sovereignty, natural environment, institutions, economics, technology, and human perception, activity, and behavior. And all of these dimensions, they're not silos, they're meant to signify the complexities and the layers of the systems and relationships that we look at, and thinking of it as an intergenerational and iterative way of looking at them, because once you make a decision within one dimension, the impacts flow out within the dimension and across dimensions and change the context. So you have to keep coming back, keep thinking about the issues you're dealing with. So that was a collaboration between the college and the enterprises early on. And just kind of sharing a few things that kind of popped out to me over the years as I've wrestled with that model of both understanding it, but also in how do I apply it or think about it. And one of the big ones is just thinking about relationships, as I mentioned before, the ways that both our ancestors were connected to the land, cared for the forest, and the ways that we are connected to the land and care for the forest today, the way we visualize that ancestral landscape that we were a part of, 10 million acres, and now look at how do we care for the 235,000 acres that we have today. So those life ways, those ways of thinking about relationships, that really came to mind for me as being in the president position. I run into a lot of events where they want you to do land acknowledgements, and even events here that we're hosting. And so I always feel kind of odd thinking, all right, what would a College of Menominee Nation land acknowledgement be? And I think just the fact that we exist is our land acknowledgement. So those relationships are important when you think about sustainability. The other one is thinking about the importance of language as signifiers or indicators of sustainability. So if you think about just names, and I kind of went through our history, and Kais Mamachitawa is our name for ourselves, the original, the ancient ones, the ancient movers. Menominee, wild rice people, full of lawn was actually the French traders coming in and noting our relationship to the rice. Wherever we went, the rice came up. When we left, the rice left. And Menominee, actually, I didn't mention that, is the Ojibwe name that they gave to us, recognizing that relationship. Full of lawn is the French name. And then now today, Menominee is the English version of people of the wild rice. Menominee is our reclaiming of our name, people of the wild rice. And in the past, elders named Menominee tribal enterprises Metukua Kiki Kanawa Tukua, the forest keepers. And I mentioned earlier this morning, Omatnamanewak Match Kakena Homatiwa Kamik, College of Menominee Nation, or the big school. I don't know if that's actually how you would translate College of Menominee Nation, but it's close enough until someone tells me different. But names, they signify transition, they indicate relationships and presence. And then thinking about the model had me thinking about out of the 10 million acres and everything that was happening with the United States government and treaty making with the Menominee people, where they would show up with their army, we would show up with our families, our women, children, leaders, and we would work on those negotiations. Through all of that period of time, a 50-year period of time, where it went from 10 million acres to 235,000 acres, we ended up here. And I just point this out in terms of the ecological richness, the cultural site richness of this place that we exist on today. And I think about that, and it's really, I wouldn't say astonishing, but the brilliance and the perseverance that our leaders had to have during that time, coming out of pandemics, people dying, different peoples coming through the region, trying to figure out how do we maintain who we are as Menominee through these times. And so the land relationships and the understanding and knowing. And then as a couple of people mentioned, Chief Oshkosh in his statement, start with the setting sun, work, rising sun, work towards the setting sun. I think about that, and that's an important philosophy, management philosophy for Menominee tribal enterprises. And but I think of it in terms of it was Chief Oshkosh as leader saying it, but it was representative of a worldview of the community of people he was representing. So he was saying what everyone in our community, or most people, understood. If we were to make a living by harvesting timber from the forest, how do we do it so that the trees last for our next generations? And so I think that's that culturally based relationship with the forest also. It maintains that reciprocity. We care for the forest will care for us. And it's been true many times over the years. We see that. And it brings to mind here another really important forestry thing that, this is, I'm sure this is replicated across tribal forestry, natural resource programs, and across these lands, but this connecting indigenous knowledges and Western-based knowledges, and thinking of Chief Oshkosh's philosophical statement in guiding how we do these things, him not knowing at the time that, GIS, GPS were going to be things. And so rather than cutting from the rising sun to the setting sun, we now have maps and computer systems that inventory and category all of the different types of habitats, plant systems, trees, geography that we have on these lands with us now. And they tell us not so much just cut linearly back and forth, but where should we cut and when for the best results in the health of the forest, both on that specific site but forest wide. And I always like this one because it is such a good representation of that, collaborative traditional knowledges and Western-based knowledges. Anyway, I think my friend Dr. Robin Kimmer, she really explains it well in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And so we had a project at the college through SDI many years ago, trying to connect our students with her students who are not from tribes, and understanding both the issues we faced here at the reservation level, not just forestry issues, but the social issues that we know we all deal with in these days and times. And how do we create opportunities for collaboration, for future allies to work together on these issues going forward? And so I just included a few quotes that I thought were relevant. TEK of Indigenous Harvesters is rich in prescriptions of sustainability. I fear that a world made of gifts cannot coexist with a world made of commodities. So always remembering what we are receiving, and to be native to a place, we must learn to speak its language. So language, again, is an important part of the things we do. And so as I think about the work that ITC does, has done, is doing, will do, I think about the experiences I've had over the last 6 years. I was never in DC until I started this job, and I've been there many times now advocating for tribal colleges and universities. And I don't know how many people are familiar, but there's 35 in the nation. American Indian Higher Education Consortium is like the ITC for tribal colleges and universities. So they help keep us organized and advocate and set us up for successful advocacy in DC. College of Menominee Nation as one of those TCUs we focus on. I say knowing who we are, to share who we are, and not just educate our own Menominee people who we were created for, but anyone who wishes to come and learn with us and from us. And so we were chartered in 93 by the Menominee people, became a land grant in 94, and more recent, currently, and actually I think the plan is up for approval. We've looked at the clan system. So if you see the college logo, it has the Menominee clan systems, the 5 principal clans. And so we really wanted to deepen, how do we connect with the how do we serve the Menominee people as our primary stakeholder? They created us. They wanted us to do certain things for them, and so we see that as a responsibility. Just a quick, some programs, important ones for tribal communities, business, education, natural resources, and also the substance abuse counselor program. So, you can kind of see we serve what we're seeing as needs of our tribes. And I like to use this one to give an example of place-based learning. At the college, this is the satellite photo up in the left corner of our college campus. So for those who have been over, it's over that way. But you can see the campus, but at the bottom is the Sustainable Development Institute. That's kind of a starting point to take the learning trail or learning path, which has different educational sites along it, both Woodhenge, which is where we've held workshops, conferences, meetings out in the woods. We have climate change research projects that are set up, different, the phenology path, signs that give you, this is where plants exist on this path, and you as a walker and a citizen scientist can log in what you're seeing at that time, and then in that way we can learn more about the phenology of our own space behind the campus. Finally, I just wanted to kind of give a quick idea of how today we work with Menominee Tribal Enterprises. Early last year, AHEC released Building Local Economies of Scale, the Impact of TCUs on Rural America. And this was a really timely report because at that time, with the administration that just came in, we were seeing proposals for large cuts to TCU funding, and in some cases, complete erasure of TCU funding, which would result in closure within a year or two in some cases. But these reports came out both individual for the TCUs, but also collectively for all 35 across the nation, and it shows the impact that we have, not just in our communities, but in across the nation in other areas. So, $3.8 billion total alumni impact. I think you said you were Haskell graduate. Another question: how many people are TCU graduates? There's a smattering there. But you can see in any room, if you ask that question and try Indian country, you'll see TCU graduates and other places. For CMN, we had a total economic output impact of $16 million. So all of those things: employment, visitor spending, alumni spending, the jobs we support, just in the two-county region we focused on. So ours and the collective study was highly conservative because we weren't exactly sure how to measure some things, so we really scaled back. So I always give those numbers, but it's definitely much higher than that. And just kind of this final one under that local economies is we've been working with MTE to partner on how can we help prepare next generation of workforce for forestry, loggers, sawyers, sawmill workers, and help in terms of revitalizing the Neobit community, which is where the sawmill is located, and also now the new CMN Neobit site, which is the old MTE office building that we purchased across the lake from the sawmill. And the idea there is, at first, is to create a training center, but over time it's been shaping into that, but also a community outreach center. So working across helping the economy, the workforce, but also the social aspects of a community, a tribal community. And so all of these things coming together, they were inspired by a lot of the discussions that we've heard here at ITC over the years. The things we do today, in my mind, I always think, how do we continue to hold our responsibility to our forest and our reservation to the point where, this is the biggest sustainability indicator. You can see our forest from space. You can see the protection that that our ancestors put in place, and especially during the 1800s, during the big cutover, the economic boom to cut everything and ship the lumber out. Our forest remains. And so that's always an inspiration in terms of not just what we do in forestry, but anywhere in our community, at the college, outside of the community as representatives. How do we continue to protect and move forward? So, I have 10 minutes. My Latin case, Natalia Kiope, thank you for listening to me today. I'll stop there before I say a nit. Am I supposed to take questions, or am I good? Oh, I don't know if, we have time for questions. I had my timer up here too. I was going pretty quick. Let me say this then. Just in coming in late, I had to quick beeline up here and jump next to Jennifer, but I saw a number of people that I've worked with along the way during my time with forestry. So Dr. Mike Dockery, he was somewhere back there. He was the USDA Forest Tribal Liaison stationed at the college for a number of years, and that was a signifier also of that deep connection with the college and Menominee sustainable forestry, and how do we support and build on that. And over the years, I really appreciated, again, another example of opportunity working with him. We worked together on that first article about the SDI model, really that seminal article that describes the functions of it and the applications, and what does that mean beyond just a forestry or sustainability model. What does that actually mean? And it's both. It's something you can stand behind, but it's something you can also critique. And I think that's important because, like Dr. Morishima's article critiqued sustainability. Was it actually helping, or was it hurting? And I think when we, going back to red herrings, today is, man, I don't know if Dr. Morishima is here, but I kind of wonder what he thinks about social media and the proliferation of red herrings. I mean, your neighbors, people you don't know from across the world, and we're all out there arguing and putting stuff out that, I don't know where they read that from, or if it just popped in their head. And so we really have to be careful of those things. And so I think when I think of ITC and the symposium here, just a number of years of reflecting on opportunity. And I would just say in closing that as you sit here, whether you're a long-time grizzled veteran of tribal forestry, working in the forest or in the streets of DC, or just a student starting out full of fight, ready to make a change in the world, you just got to be mindful of those red herrings, both especially online. So that's my cautionary tale to end my speech. But yeah, but thank you all. Thank you for leaving your families and your places to be with us for this week, and I hope you take advantage of the tours and the events, and enjoy your time here at Menominee. And